Доброе утро, уважаемые коллеги. Приветствую всех.
A very good morning, dear colleagues. I'm very happy to welcome everyone who has come to our event. I am very happy to welcome everyone who's online with us. We also have a broadcast online. So once again, this is a joint event of ours that is we are doing together with the Ministry of Energy of the Russian Federation. That is our stock exchange breakfast, where we're going to discuss a whole number of exciting questions. But today, I would like to introduce our distinguished moderator, that is Alexander Dinkin, who is seated on my right, the president of Primakov National Research Institute of World Economy and International Relations of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Mr. Dinkin also happens to be a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, professor, chairman of the Presidential Commission on the Energy and Fuel Complex, and I could go on and on. So, Mr. Dinkin, the floor is yours. Please guide us through this session. Thank you very much, Alexei. I'm very happy to welcome you all, dear colleagues. I have to say that we have a somewhat busy schedule planned for today, and it is obvious that today we have a very serious objective to focus on creation of national price indicators for Russian products and primarily export items. That is not a new goal to us. We've discussed it a lot before. That includes the corresponding decrees of the President of Russia and a number of guidelines issued by the Russian government. A lot has been done already, and especially in the context of development of stock exchange trade and the system of registration of OTC transactions. Well, one could say that the Russian government is conducting a sustainable course to expand the use of potential of stock exchange at the refineries product, natural gas, coal, and many more. And this is why today we would like to discuss three major issues today. This is the stock exchange future of various energy and fuel sector aspects of our country, that is development of price indicators based on a transparent market information, and finally a topic that we discuss a lot is import substitution of the indicators and benchmarks. For the sake of time, I'm not going to introduce all of our distinguished speakers at once. I'm sure you know all of them, but I'd rather introduce them one by one as I request them to take the floor. Additionally, we also have microphones in the room, and I do hope that we will have some time available so that all the people present here could ask their questions and comment on the discussion. So we all know that starting from spring 2022, the leading world providers of information services have started leaving Russian market. At the same time, we know that indices and indicators from those providers are definitive for many business processes and political matters. That applies to both corporate and state-owned, from the pricing formulas for foreign exchange transactions up to calculation of fees, to the exported goods, the mineral extraction tax calculation, and so on and so forth. Due to the events we're all aware of that are happening in the oil markets, we also see that the representativeness of those indicators has now considerably deteriorated, and they're not really operational under the current situation. Price information is becoming less and less available, and many market participants are complaining that the indicators they publish are out of touch with reality. And nonetheless, we see that they are still being used to calculate the fees and taxes. Some say that on the global oil market, we see a state of a light schizophrenia. And that's not my metaphor. That was said by the Minister of Energy of Saudi Arabia, His Excellency Abdelaziz Ben Salman, and I quote, paper and physical oil markets have become increasingly more disconnected. Derivatives no longer represent the equilibrium price defined by the balance of supply and demand in the physical oil market. Generally, one could say that the so-called paper market, the futures market, is now playing a considerably smaller wall, its depth and liquidity was deteriorated, and the market is losing one of its key functions, namely to create the necessary tools to manage risks. And I would say that the level of discussions heated around the mechanism of pricing and all benchmarks. This is something that we are all talking about today. And this is where I'd like to address my question to Mr. Maxim Trzaskórsky, the head of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service. You know that the Russian government has approved a guiding document there, the National Plan for Development of Competition for 2021 to 2025. Also, there is a roadmap being prepared for organized stock exchange trade for 2022 to 2025. Mr. Trzaskórsky, can you please brief us on the state of affairs and work conducted for those documents? Do you think is there a necessity to make some adjustments to this work? And how do you see the role of exchange infrastructure in implementation of the goals that are defined in those documents? The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Mr. Denkin, distinguished colleagues. Indeed, in our plan, we foresee around 15 key areas, and in about 5 of them, we cover the matters related to stock exchange trading, and this additional work plan is being approved by the Russian government. Well, I would say it does not require any additional adjustments or amendments because we have no shortage of work to do with the plans and events that we plan to conduct. I would say we do have some difficulties implementing the goals that were set in those plans. We are lagging behind a little bit. The key goal now is to identify national market indicators, and this is exactly what this plan is aimed for. We see some positive outcomes of exchange trade in refinery products, and this is the mechanism that allows us to retain prices and allows all participants to be able to forecast the situation and have some understanding of the future to ensure stability. But we are a little bit stuck in implementation work in other areas. We have some problems with trading metals. So far, we do not have clarity on the sections. We do have some trading in armored metals, but we have a lot of plans, more than enough, I would say. Those plans are quite complete and comprehensive. But it's time to move over to practical implementation, and that is never easy to do. Because we see that some colleagues are not really willing to do that, and that is somewhat unusual for them. So I guess we need to do our best to attract new sections of traded goods, and then indicators would become our reality. Thank you very much, Mr. Trzaskórsky. Thank you for being frank with us and providing an open comment. We all understand very well that the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service is the key driver for development of exchange trade, both in terms of competition and promotion of transparent market pricing. My next question goes to Mr. Machalnikov, Deputy Minister of Energy of the Russian Federation. How do you think, Mr. Machalnikov, in terms of development of a market pricing model for the Russian coal, what do you think about trading and exchange trade mechanisms in the current situation? Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, once again. I believe having breakfast at a stock exchange is a great trend, and we should continue with that. As for exchange trade development, well, the way we understand it, that is exactly the transparent mechanism that is undoubted. Because here we are talking about two anonymous parties, the buyer and the seller, making a transaction at the exchange. They're both accredited, and manipulating data in this situation is something that is highly unlikely. So we do believe that exchange mechanism and trading coal at an exchange would have a solely positive impact, and it is necessary to develop this possibility. We can see that for more than a year, registration of OTC transaction is happening, and for us, that is a much more representative way to identify the price of coal on the territory of Russia. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to address Pavel Zavalny, who is the chairman of the Committee of the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation on Energy. Mr. Zavalny, in the context of specific industries, well, I guess you are best positioned in order to comment on the gas industry due to your experience, but what would be your assessment of those three topics that I have identified in my introduction? Well, dear colleagues, just to set the tone for our discussion today, I'd like to make a general comment on how we think competitive pricing should evolve in fuel and energy complex. Well, exchange is just a tool, but what is it that we actually want to achieve? Well, that is the most important thing. That is all about goal setting. So what is energy and fuel complex today? Well, it produces around 2 billion tons of fuel of primary energy carriers. And more than 50% of it is being exported, which provides us with foreign exchange, revenue, positive trading balance, and most importantly, that is a source for economic development of the country. And in the Russian state budget, I mean the federal budget, different years, the revenue from oil and gas account for more than 40%. So the budget for the next year, even under the current circumstances, 40% of it is coming from oil and gas. And of course, covering the demand of the domestic market. What is necessary for the domestic market? Secure supplies and price. We are, of course, energy-intensive country. Our economy is energy-intensive. And in a situation of globalization, we are integrated in the global economy, and our competitive advantage is all about cheap energy sources. And of course, we are obliged to provide it to the domestic economy on favorable conditions as compared to export prices. We need to cover the demand of the domestic market for all types of energy resources so that we have this competitive edge on external foreign markets, be that metal or steel production. We also want to make sure the domestic market evolves in a situation of competition, because competition is the best way to ensure those indicators. So in terms of achieving this competitive situation, what matters to me is not just making sure that gas competes with gas or refinery products compete with other refinery products of other producers. Well, I guess that's the second stage. But the first stage is to ensure that there is competition between different types of fuel, because fuel is the key source for all energy resources. And I guess this is the competition that we so far have not developed properly. What are the disbalances that we see here on this market? Well, virtually all types of resources, we have market pricing with all the standards we have for coal. But if we talk about natural gas, and it accounts for more than 55% of our energy mix, and generally 80% of our energy mix is thermal energy, well, we have price regulations on gas that has been there for decades, and it results in certain disproportions in terms of energy mix. Yes, energy mix was shifting towards gas. Yes, we have a lot of gas. It's the cheapest and most environmentally friendly type of fuel, but this is a certain distortion to the whole behavior model when you take a decision on what type of fuel you'd like to use. That is a certain disbalance that is standing in the way of development of the gas industry itself. Well, we can see what kind of effort it takes to develop gasification in the country, how much money it takes. That is money of Gazprom, tariff solutions, money from the region, and lately the decision was made to provide subsidies to the households from the federal budget. Well, in this overly regulated model, we do not have sources for development, and that is a distortion to the model. If you consider fuel types, it can be much cheaper than gas. Everyone wants to buy it, but it's not enough to develop transportation network because transportation logistics is very expensive. So this disproportion exists up until now. And if we talk about domestic gas market, well, mostly it was formed and shaped by export. Gazprom was working on export, and there was time when Gazprom would send 1/4 of all the produced gas and would send 3/4 of revenue. Now, 1/3 of gas is being exported and 2/3 are staying for the domestic market, and they're getting just 1/3 of the revenue they used to get. So for decades, domestic markets was subsidized through export. And today, this possibility is no longer available. Well, maybe it would stay for a year or two thanks to high prices, but no more. Because 100 billion of export items would drop off and the government would lose revenue items, and most importantly, the domestic market would be distorted. So I guess this is something that we need to focus. We need to take care of market pricing. The more so that it is an obligation that we are undertaking by 2025 to shape a shared Eurasian economic market for gas. And we haven't created that yet. We have a quasi market. We need to send the right signals for development of all industries, right signals to the consumers. They need to see how this market is going to evolve, what is the actual availability of this energy resource, and exchange is to play a key role there, because the exchange is to create and develop those price indicators that are necessary to make deals and contracts and to foresee the future. This is the goal that I guess we would face up until 2030, and we need to achieve it. And we work very closely together with the St. Petersburg Mercantile Exchange, and they're doing a great job. It's great that they are also trading coal now. So thank you very much for the work you do. We're determined to support you in the future. Thank you very much, Mr. Zavalny. My special gratitude goes to you for giving assessment to the role of exchange in the competition between different types of fuel and increasing the competitiveness of Russian fuel. Now, I'd like to address Anatoly Yanovsky, who is assistant to the Chief of Staff of the Presidential Executive Office of the Russian Federation. Well, Mr. Yanovsky, we've known each other for decades, and you occupy a very high post. You are also responsible for the Presidential Commission for Energy and Fuel Complex, but I'd like to make reference to your past experience working in the Energy and Fuel Complex, and based on the position you are taking now, what do you think most important and meaningful in organizational work to develop national price indicators? The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Dinkin, for your kind words. Well, obviously, the topic of our today's discussion is relevant not just for the stock exchange, but also for commodities exchange. For each of those markets, there are specific methodological and organizational issues. If we talk about stock exchange, I would say that at the moment, at the Moscow Stock Exchange, there are 38 mining and energy companies being traded. Out of them, 19, if we talk London and New York Stock Exchange, they would go to IPO there, and trading for them there are only conducted in a passive mode. Likewise, the St. Petersburg International Mercantile Exchange is trying to organize work with some junior companies, but obviously under those circumstances, the volume of trading on the Russian stock exchanges would grow, and from the Western stock exchanges, they would inevitably move back to the Russian. And I should also say that back in 2018, there was a development strategy approved for the mineral and commodity base in Russia, which foresees organization of mining and geological audit with creation of the respective expert institutions. And the reports and audit conclusions of those commissions are to be acknowledged and recognized by both Russian and international financial institutions.
And unfortunately, the question of formulating of national system of audit hasn't yet been tackled. a working group was set up to discuss this agenda, and the goal is to introduce classification of reserves and cost assessment and its harmonization of the national classification for reporting across all types of mineral resources. And this should lead to simplification of independent audit and strengthen current expert community in this sphere. And basing on the system of such independent audit, we need clarification of the provisions of the central bank for disclosure of standardized information by subsoil users of their activities, not yet present at the moment. And such standardized information should be used both when issuing securities by organizations, subsoil users, and when receiving lending and exchange trading. And that's the first thing. Number two, about the commodities market. We are already aware, and we see the dynamics showing that that the enhancement is going through wider product range and also growth of trading activities in various positions, but there are several problems to it. First, this is the problem of utilizing the indicators that we are having and as effectively as possible. What does it mean? It means that as many participants of the market as possible should be part of the process, and also the agencies of governmental management and power, both on regional, municipal, and federal levels, and also companies with state participation. And probably it's high time to introduce into the legislation on state procurement, include the relevant provision that can oblige to purchase from the exchange not only currently operating electronic platforms. That is part of the regulation of Law 44 today. Another problem is the problem of stimulating various participants of the same product to maximum representation of it in the exchange. And it makes sense to continue the practice that exists today to set minimal volumes for commodities in exchange trading by dominating suppliers. For instance, this is relevant for gas, and their increase annually, as we see today, together with the anti-monopoly service and the exchange, how it happens in a refined products market, how diesel and gasolines, how they grow. Problem number three, from my perspective, is related to the necessity to harmonize various classifications of the same product used for various purposes to assess geological reserves and also formulate the measures of support from the state and taxation of statistical financial reporting, and also in works and services procurement for state and municipal needs in exchange trading with the regulation of tariffs in railroad transportation and customs regulation. Across all these spheres, we have various types of classifications. And unification will allow us to move forward and advance across all these areas. And I would say that the Ministry of Energy in 2021 has done some work related to coal and coal products, and specific plan of actions is prepared. And I hope that the government will adopt this plan of actions and this concept, and executive bodies will start working in this area. And the last problem, which actually calls for more research and measures, is related to development of trading in our exchange of export export commodities. This doesn't happen today, despite Alexander Alexandrovich mentioned the Presidential Committee on the Energy and Fuel Complex. Several years ago, relevant decisions were made that such work should start. Thank you very much for your attention. Anatoly Borisovich, thank you very much. You said three very important, urgent points. I think they are really important, especially in today's reality. And one problem that the Fuel Complex Committee looked into, it's great that we are mentioning it today, and it is very good that you're also reminding all of us of it. So, colleagues, now we're having the interactive voting session in our discussion. So let's have a QR code on our screen. So the story is as follows: you can make a photo of this QR code and answer one of four questions, all of the four questions, and we will show you the results of the poll on the screen. Please start. Can you see the questions and the answers? Colleagues, I would like to draw your attention to the following. Also, those who are watching YouTube broadcast, this is voting for everyone. If you see the QR code, if you use your laptops, you can also vote. Thank you very much, those who participated in this voting. Mr. Zavalny, could you please comment the results? Pavel Nikolaevich, please. Colleagues, I answered in the same way. Why so? I can comment. As I said in my presentation, exchange is an instrument to achieve market pricing for any commodity, and energy in any format is also a commodity. And in order to develop competition and offtakes, this is very important for our country because we are aiming at the future, and the market pricing can give proper signals to investors, oil and gas, petrochemistry, and this will allow us a deeper progress. And what we have today is not enough to build up the plans for further development. A national system of indicators across all types of commodities is a very important thing because it gives proper signals for development across all areas and for investments across areas. And the sooner we complete this process, the sooner we can see the results. Thank you very much, Pavel Nikolaevich. I would like to address Alexei Ivanovich Kulapin, head of the Russian Energy Agency. Alexei Ivanovich, your organization is a very important element of the state system for information and analytical procurement in this sector, and you are accumulating and processing and distributing a huge amount of important sectoral information. And from your expert position, what are the prospects for articulation of price indicators based on exchange information? Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for this very interesting question. I would like to look at the problem of formulation of exchange indicators from the point of view of green agenda and energy transition. Despite considering the recent developments, the theme of green transition, green agenda is not as relevant, but we will understand that we'll get back to it inevitably. And the reality of today, in the context of processing and dissemination of scientific and technical information, we see that the outlook of the energy transition has changed in the world. Previous paradigm was as follows: the trajectory and scenarios of such transition should actually be based on technologies, but today we see that the situation has changed dramatically, and the trajectory for development of technologies should become defining in terms of scenarios of energy transition. And this is a point for global energy security. Speaking about new indicators as a response to new challenges, I would like to speak about this theme of green energy and energy transition. From my perspective, we should not forget about such area of activities as the turnover of carbon units through exchanges and exchange indicators. Today we are having an experiment, as you know, to create a market of carbon units basing on the Sakhalin region. Specific laws and bylaws are adopted, and the timeline for the experiment is also defined, and the order of interaction of companies is also defined. The order of quoting for these emissions and the mechanism for quotas is also set up. The first climate element is being built on Iturup, and the first sun station is being built that supplies power to an isolated power district. And implementation of such a project and building such a sun station does not only mean savings in terms of diesel supplies to Iturup Island, but also reduces the emissions of greenhouse gas. And based on this project, we are working on algorithms and the concept of formulating carbon units and the price for carbon units. Moreover, for today, as of today, in September, the first deal was concluded in selling carbon units, and that was the first case. But I think that implementation of such approach and implementation of turning carbon units through mechanisms of exchange trading will contribute to attracting investments into creation and implementation of climate projects. This is not a new or fresh idea, but international experience also proves this. International practice proves this. A year ago, within the framework of the same event at the Russian Energy Week organized by St. Pete Mercantile Exchange, I already mentioned it, that our ex-partners at various conferences, climate conferences, they usually say that this story about climate and green transition, this is just a mechanism and a stimulus to upgrade and modernize technical development of various sectors of fuel and energy sector. And I think we should stay in this trend. And from my perspective, setting up such mechanisms, creating such exchange indicator as the price for carbon unit will contribute to technological development of various industries, including fuel sector. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexey Ivanovich. Thank you very much for reminding all of us of this important theme. It hasn't been on the agenda recently, but your interpretation, just from the point of view of economic efficiency of it, not political choice, as it was the case in many countries of Europe, I think it is justified indeed. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, I would like to give the floor to Director of the Department for Coal Industry, Ministry of Energy, Petr Bobulov. Petr Mikhailovich, coal industry. The picture is slightly different, and the full-fledged trading of coal hasn't yet started in the exchange, though the plans of launching such trading were announced several times, and there is an advanced system of registration of OTC deals with coal. Can this price information substitute the data from international pricing agencies? What do you think? And when do you think exchange indicators will emerge for the internal market, or probably in the future for the external market as well? And how are things with the joint decree on coal? Please, you're welcome. Good morning, esteemed colleagues. Thank you very much for your question. I would answer in a wider manner. As for full-fledged trading of coal in the exchange, my opinion is that it'll come, definitely, and I'll tell you why, it is a very urgent and important and a very applied question to answer. I hear what colleagues say, and I agree completely to what you say. You're speaking about investments, development, and competition, but exchange trading for today, well, it so happened, is a point of a symbiosis of the sectors of the economy with tariffs and without tariffs. So together with the Anti-Monopoly Service and other stakeholders, we did the following. Solid fuel can be supplied as energy fuel. Why? Because we're focusing on energy. So it goes to utility sector and electricity sector. They are sectors with tariffs. I'm speaking about heat production and electricity, and in sectors with tariffs, we will supply fuel with non-tariff prices. Who can set the prices? Well, contracts between stakeholders, or I think indicators can show it. Internal Russian indicators can help us in this, and that's why starting exchange trading with the GAMP brands, these are the main brands of energy coals. We are calculating now the prices. Probably the product range will also be enhanced. Yes. Exchange trading and competition, yes, but tariff and non-tariff sectors of the economy, that's the combination we have, and we'll have a look at whether it will be a positive case or not. But in other areas, this case was quite successful. We are also starting from 10%. If it is a positive result and everyone is okay, all stakeholders are happy about that. Everyone, consumers of heat and electricity energy and producers, I'm switching from suppliers to consumers now. And if it is a successful case, then the brand list should be enhanced, and we should be more active in exchange trading also. And let's get to the last line of your question. When will we have the decree? As the sooner the better, actually. The document is 100% ready. It passed the Ministry of Economic Development and various committees in the Anti-Monopoly Service. Now it is being registered in the Ministry of Justice. And we hope that in the nearest future, I think by the end of the year, it will be adopted. We plan that it might come earlier, but we are not less active in our activities, and we need this document. And exchange trading of coal, of energy coal, for us, for coal industry of the country, is important. As for indicators, yes, you're right, absolutely, saying that it so happened that indicators usually came from our esteemed colleagues from other countries, and the mechanism that is being created today also at the platform of your exchange and the deals that without exchange trading was fixed for years offered us an amount of analytics where we see the indicators, but we need to formalize them properly and to have proper legislative base for it, all regulations, and actually commission it. And I have it here, and my colleagues have it. We understand where and how and in what brands of coal the prices were articulated. We have the facts, and in terms of indices for coal, this is a serious base we've accumulated over the years, and now it just should be turned into legislative field.
I hope I've answered your question. Maybe just to cite a few numbers to make it clearer. Whenever we talk about energy or coal, we get to hear that there is too little of it on the exchange. No, that's not true. About 90 million tons in energy alone, that is energy coal, in the housing sector. Again, we are talking about those sectors of economy that receive subsidies, limitation to growth of tariffs and payment for utilities, and no tariffs for coal. This is a considerable volume. That is why I would say we're very serious treating this issue. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you. Thank you very much for your response. And we do hope that the Ministry of Justice will not be slowing the process down. My next question goes to Pavel Shaklevich, who is the current Executive Director of the Department of Financial Policy of the Ministry of Finance. I have a strategic question to you, if I may. We all know that the Ministry of Finance is updating the strategy for development of financial market up to 2030. So I'm curious whether you are going to reflect the issue of independence of pricing indicators in this policy. And how do you see the future development of this matter, and whether you consider that we are to develop and create our own pricing agencies? Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Good morning, dear colleagues. Yes, indeed, at the moment, the Ministry of Finance, together with the Bank of Russia, is updating its strategy for development of the financial market up until 2030. And the chairman of government has set as a deadline December 21st. So we have clarity on the content of this strategy. And I would say that the issue of price indicators and pricing agencies is reflected in this document. Not completely, probably, but there is a separate section dedicated to this matter. In the previous version here, a year ago, where we suspended the development of our strategy, we had a three-level approach, and this strategy was a high-level document, more a detailed document for 3 years of development on the key developments of the financial market and the roadmap. So those are the documents where we have identified price indicators and all the work associated with them. Now we understand that we absolutely need to bring it up to a strategic level of our document. And that is why, answering your question, I would say that a strategy will have a separate section on price indicators. But if we move away from that and go to the practical aspects of this matter, like I was saying, we have a lot of documents, but very few practical steps. In terms of systemic work, right now, together with the Bank of Russia, we already issued a grain index in August of this year. And also, we prepared a working group. Now we would like to apply similar systemic approach to all indicators and keep working with us at the expert committee of the Exchange Committee of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service. In terms of development of exchange trade of commodities, we made a proposal to the government to extend a list of products that are to be exchange traded. In terms of ability of a price indicators to be representative, I guess it's also relevant for registration of OTC transactions, and that is very relevant for this issue. So likewise, we have launched a process for extension of a list of products and items that are to be registered. Now we have requested the interested stakeholders to join us in this work, and we're ready to continue this work. In terms of pricing agencies, we have Interfax, NRD, and similar pricing agencies that have been working in this area before, but were not active enough. Now, based on the initiative of the Bank of Russia that we very much support, we are going to implement those pricing agencies into various legislative acts so that we receive more representative indices and indicators that could be applied for calculation of business models of the companies. In terms of expansion of the Institute of the futures contracts and derivative contracts, clearly this segment of the market should be developed. So the hedging culture is also something that we are willing to encourage with the companies. And while working on the strategy, we realize that the hedging culture is available with many producers, but not all of them. And again, we are going to encourage it and develop. So I guess this is how we see approach to this matter. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, if I may, I'd like to contact Mr. Popov, who is the head of Department of Supervision and Monitoring over Exchange and Clearing Infrastructure at the Department of Infrastructure at the Bank of Russia. Obviously, Bank of Russia has and plays a decisive role in regulation of exchange trade. So, Mr. Popov, what would you say? Probably today it's difficult to overestimate the importance of infrastructure. And under the current turbulent times, don't you think that it is there to send clear and representative price signals, especially since we see the Western pricing agencies leaving Russia? How is this substitution going to work? As we know, based on the outcomes of the strategic session conducted in August, it was decided to develop the national system of financial and trade indicators and their administration. Would you please tell us what the Bank of Russia is doing in this area? What is the vision of the Bank of Russia regarding this system? And what is your plan to conduct regulation and supervision, and what is the attitude of the bank to the methodology of price assessment? Do you think that survey method could be used there, or should we rather pay attention to the actual transaction? Because S&P Plus is sometimes using that type of surveys and questionnaires for their assessment. Thank you for your question. Good morning, dear colleagues. Indeed, after the strategic session in August, we received the corresponding instructions, and we were well prepared for them. We have accumulated certain experience of interacting on those streams, on the price indicators. We've had certain ideas that we've been discussing for a while, and the demand for those indicators is coming up now under the current circumstances. So we've accelerated this work, and we've tested it with our colleagues from the executive authorities. We have come up with a potential scheme of work. And right now, the working version we have is that indeed we're going to have an inter-ministerial working group under the Stock Exchange Committee, where we are going to discuss potential methodologies and indicators. So we assume that administrators of indicators that create the respective indicator could come up with their suggestions regarding methodologies to be applied. They can tell us and answer the questions of the working group and prove that their indicators are representative on their respective market. If we talk about the concept of an administrator and methodology on the market, I would say the general rationale for the commodity market and financial market is the following. Administrator is the one who creates an index, monitors the index, calculates the index, and publishes information on the index, develop methodology. And at this stage, we believe those are primarily organizers of trading, and exchanges have certain experience there. Exchange is a clear counterparty for us. We have experience of supervising and regulating exchanges. They are more transparent and clearer, because they have clear and defined rules of doing trading. There is a contract, an agreement they enter on doing trading, the access rights for participants of the trading that allow us to filter some fraudulent participants. So there is a certain compliance check at the access point. We understand how products and items are allowed for trading. And again, I mean that is applicable both for commodities and financial exchange. But there are always specific rules that are to be complied with. We understand how information is disclosed, how information is protected, and we understand that organizers of trading have certain systems of internal control, because one of the elements of making indicators representative is to make sure that it is, in one way or another, is controlled by the administrator internally. So there is always an alternative opinion that the indicator is clean and not manipulated. Well, the methodology for calculating the indicator is, of course, the key thing here. What is to be assessed and appraised? Because indicator is not just an outcome of trading or a trade day. It is a broader concept, and how exactly one should calculate the indicator, well, that is subject to a creative approach. So methodology both calculates and describes the indicator, what are the information sources used there, what data, how frequently that is done, how they are published, and availability of an expert counsel or no availability of an expert advisor who could provide this alternative opinion. And it is important to talk about those sources. The more sources, the better. Purely statistically and mathematically, that is the case. That makes indicator more representative. We prefer data from exchange. Obviously, if there is a track record of the matter, the track record of trading with a particular product. But we also need to understand there are OTC trades. There is a registration of contracts under the Presidential Decree 623. We need to work with that as well. There is OTC trading that is less standardized, but of course work has to be conducted, and the Bank of Russia is working on that to develop trading system. Altogether, that would provide us with maximum transparency. So various platforms can act as information sources for administrator of the indicator, and the more information like that we get, the better. Coming back to the potential questionnaire method and the surveys, well, this is always the last resort for us. A means of last resort, because it is affordable and acceptable under certain circumstances. If there is no relevant trading information, you could use it, but you need to understand what is the capacity, the depth of the market, the number of participants. There were some cases in the global practice. LIBOR is the most well-known indicator based on that type of methods, but it was being manipulated. So it is acceptable, but the priority goes to trading data, OTC data, and then only surveys. But we are working on a draft law that would describe what I just said for financial and commodity indicators. And in the future, we will present it in one way or another. And as for how exactly it is going to work, well, we will try to see what we get. Like I said, it's work in progress. We work with various stock exchanges, and we will express our position on the refineries products trading in the future. But later on, the role of the group will be to monitor how those indicators work and to make sure that those methodologies are up to date and are properly applied. That would be my response. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your approach. Dear colleagues, I'd like to move away from questions to the representative of legislative authorities and executive bodies to business representatives. And I'd like to address a question to Dmitry Mironov, who is General Director of Gazprom GNP Sales, who is online with us. Mr. Mironov, would you please tell us, in your work, are you really tied to import price indicators? Do you really need a Russian price indicator, domestic price indicator, namely the one defined at an exchange? and I know that your company is actively participating there. And I'm talking both about spot market and derivatives market. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I represent a group of companies that is working in Gazprom and responsible for domestic sales. And of course, we're very much interested in transparency of our operations. And in order to showcase our attitude to import indicators, I have to look back to the period of 10 years and take an example of the liquefied natural gas market. Russian LNG market proceeded from the indicator published by one of the foreign agencies, and this indicator was relevant for one specific market, one specific Eastern European country. We believe that it is not very logical, to say the least, because our market is somewhat bigger than the market of this Eastern European country. And just like in case of many other indicators that are used at the LNG market, there were a lot of questions regarding their methodology and reliability. Certainly, all those years, we very much supported the idea of creation of the domestic market indicators that would allow us to clearly identify the sale price for us, for our counter agents, and that is the price that would be representative. Now, if we take a look what has been happening over the last years, we would see a serious qualitative shift that was happening largely due to the active development of the exchange trade. And I would say the LNG market and refineries products market are the market that could be used as benchmarks for development of price indicators on the other markets. Well, maybe that would require some minor adjustment under the National Plan for Development of Competition. That is the necessity to develop derivatives market, and those are the indicators that we will have at the derivatives market, the forward curve. We partially have it already, but I would say it would require further development and greater liquidity so that we could grow and evolve further. And development of wholesale and small wholesale markets would provide for the independence of external indicators that we do not know how are calculated. But it happens so that not for all the commodity markets we are fully unbound from commodity indicators. And I guess that is a certain problem, because in the commodity markets, where everyone is still watching the quotations of foreign markets for oil and gas, and taking into account the global situation this year, that would be risky to take a look to those indicators because there is a certain gap between what is happening in the foreign markets and our reality and the possibility to have access to those foreign markets. So, as for further development of the markets where we operate, we think it is vital to do our best to create representative price indicators for commodities, for oil, gas condensate, and those indicators have to be actual indicators of the domestic market. And we believe the best way to go would be to develop such an indicator through the use of supply contracts and derivative contracts for oil and gas condensate. We keep experimenting with that, and that is something that we are determined to do. That is the whole market, from the commodity to the refinery, and we need to have a hedging mechanism for prices, spreads, and generally this market would be self-sufficient and transparent. Thank you very much. I tried to analyze your speech, and I would say the key words you've been using were comprehensiveness, independent, and transparent. Well, thank you for that. And my next question goes to Alexei Kovalenko, Commercial Director for the CIS at SOEC company. Well, the question to you is similar. What is your take on the necessity to develop price indicators in coal industry, and how do you see the prospects for coal companies going to exchange trading? Good afternoon. Good morning. Thank you for giving me the floor. Well, as the previous speakers were mentioning, exchange trading in coal is still at the preparation stage, and we expect that it would become fully operational in the nearest future. SUEC company has a positive assessment of the current development for implementation of exchange indices and stock indices. That was active work that we've been conducting a number of years to develop the OTC index, and all the market participants from the side of suppliers were providing their data to the exchange, and the indices were calculated, and they are being applied today. They can be applied in daily operations.
And this is really a valuable result of the work done. As for organized trading of coal products, SUEC from the first steps is in close interaction with the exchange and anti-monopoly regulator and the Ministry of Energy, and is active in the process of development of an updated methodology, since previously this process was not defined. And we've also approached a joint document that regulates the opportunities to trade coal in the exchange. And in the nearest future, the company will make steps to go to trading, and we will expect that we will have next year, we will have an exchange index for coal. And I would like to mention the following. I'm representing a producing company, but there are also consumers who have to have stimulus for going to the exchange and maintain the liquidity needed in the exchange. And in this area, we are also articulating our ideas to anti-monopoly body and the Minister of Energy. Colleagues hear our position and are actively participating in the process, supporting our initiatives. That's why, closing my short speech, I can say that yes, we need this kind of work and it is valuable, and we hope that in our activities in the coming future, we will have the indices that will become a new instrument in the market that will allow us to, in a transparent manner, to assess the level of prices that is in place in coal sales. Thank you very much. I hope I answered your question. Thank you very much. I think, yes, you answered the question, and I think that the representatives of businesses are more decisive and positive about exchange trading and the necessity to create Russian indicators. And in order to prove this, we will have another interactive poll session. The methodology is the same. You have your QR code and 3 questions to answer. Let's start the voting. Colleagues, thank you very much for your votes. Unanimous result both in online and offline regimes. Mr. Rybnikov, could you please comment the result? You know, for me, this is something unexpected. because when we were articulating the question and the answers to it, we were sure that the market is much more liberal towards sources of information. And we heard the position of the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank about price agencies and questionnaire methodology, and the level of liberty among our state bodies is higher than how the market perceives the whole thing. And, I plan to articulate this idea at the end, but I can say it now. The exchange's position is quite straightforward, since we see real deals through exchange trading and the 6-3 decree of the government on registration of OTC deals. Our position is as follows: let's develop the system. We should not, probably it sounds rude, but we have differences in opinions with other agencies. But we think that we should not develop a system based on questionnaire methodology, because it created in the international market, it created a large amount of negative cases. That's number one. Number two, we have a ready-made system based on accumulation of data on really concluded deals. Let's not dilute it, at least at the initial stage. I think the task is different now. I think the task is that the indicators we're producing, we should say, by the way, we should admit our colleagues from the National Mercantile Grains Exchange. These indicators should go into practice of operations of state bodies for calculation of duties and taxes. We've done the same in crops, and export duties for crops is fixed by the decree of the government, and it is recalculated in rubles on regular basis. Why can't we do the same across other commodities? I am surprised the market is supportive 100%, and I think this is a sign of trust to us, and we will suggest that we move in this direction. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Indeed, the result is surprising. So, colleagues, we are having today with us three representatives of international exchanges. Mr. Ahmet Turkoglu, President of Energy Exchange from Istanbul, and Alexander Grigorievich Osmolovsky, Head of the Board of Belarus Universal Commodities Exchange, and Kristina Prokudina, Deputy Head of the Board of Uzbekistan Republican Mercantile Exchange. I will give the floor to each of our international guests, and my questions to them are as follows. How do you work with price indicators in your countries? What role goes to exchange prices and exchange trading in this system, and how participants of trading actually perceives the exchange and its operations? And please comment the role of exchange prices in economic and tax policy of your countries. Please, Mr. Ahmet Turkoglu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank to my colleague, Mr. Alexei Rybnikov, for his kind invitation to this excellent organization with distinguished guests. Actually, I was planning to talk something else yesterday, but yesterday President Putin declared a game-changer action related to Turkish market, so I will focus on hub business together with infra-marginal prices. 3 years ago, not 2 years, 3 years ago, December 2019, I was here to talk Russian energy gas forum. The Russian gas forum. I said our total volume was 7 billion euros as energy exchange. But today, I can say it will be more than 35 billion euros, maybe 40 billion euros at the end of the year, because of two facts. The first one is growing exchange business with good price signals. The second one is increasing energy prices. So I will skip most of the parts I prepared, but you can get it from the organization committee. It is open for everybody. We have markets for gas and power. We are operating spot markets for gas and power. They had an intraday markets. And last year, we launched future gas and future power markets. Our gas market for futures includes physical delivery. As you can see, prices and quantities are increasing in our exchange. I will not focus on them, but it created, and the share of exchange is getting better, but this year, because of high prices and requirement of collateral, caused a little bit less share in terms of exchange, and some of them moved to bilateral contracts because of less requirement for collateral. But anyway, the volume of the exchange is increasing rapidly. The problem with increasing prices on this page, actually, we started to, although as an exchange we don't want it, we started to apply a regulation called inframarginal pricing. At the beginning, we were not happy, but now I can say, okay, this helped also to improve our markets. Now, European countries also are taking this action into consideration. They are copying the similar thing in European energy markets. Actually, after the pandemic, with high demand, our prices, especially for gas, started to increase. Then the regulation decided a price cap for our market prices. You see at the first column, our cap for market prices increased month by month. And also, because of difference of costs, regulation decided to change the cap for different sources. We call it inframarginal pricing. So let's say you are a renewable generator, your cost is very low. If your subsidy period finished, you are free to sell at our exchange. Then regulation said, okay, you can sell, but your price is this month, for this month is 82 euro per megawatt hours. Before pandemic, it was around 40 to 50, so cap is double of before pandemic prices, let's say, and they get it. Today, our day-ahead price is 207 euro. We pay 207 euro to all market participants, but at the end of the month, during the settlement, we collect the difference. Let's say for gas, since here is gas country, if you are a gas generating power plant, you are generating electricity from gas, your cap is 256. So today's price is 207, so you pay the difference. Then we collect that money and send it to distribution companies to finance consumers. So consumer price didn't increase so much by this, let's say, levy or subsidy by the government. So I think this is important. If you want later, I can explain it in detail. That's the main idea. We have different caps for different sources. We pay market price, but if the source price is more than market price, then we call the difference back for consumers. Let's come to my main topic in terms of being hub in Turkey. Actually, what I understand yesterday, President Putin would like to create a hub like TTF, MBP, or JKM in different regions of the world. It is possible. You see, we have a large connection with East and West. We are a kind of connector. We also ourselves a big consumer in the region. So it's possible, maybe, I don't know, after the governmental meetings, there will be some more pipelines. In terms of our exchange, let me show the capacities. These are the internal capacities, domestic capacities in Turkey. You see pipeline capacity for input is stable for the last 2 years, and next year it will be stable. For an LNG, we increased it from 130 to 150 cubic million meters. Next year it will be stable, but the storage is getting more and more. You see, next year we are planning to reach 155 billion cubic meters storage. In total, next year our input capacity will be 470. Our gas consumption is increasing. Actually, gas power plants are the key buyers of gas in Turkey, but the key point in Turkish market is not gas power plants, it is household. It's increasing by the government decision. Actually, in the past we were supplying gas for household, for big cities now. If the population is more than 10,000, although it is not feasible to have pipeline infrastructure, for social reasons, government supports all people with gas flow. We are importing from different countries, but the main source, around 50%, is Russian gas. We have different contracts, long-term and short-term. Our pipeline contracts for long-term are getting the main share, together with long-term LNG and spot LNG contracts. And that's the key point, I think. Our market is growing for gas as a gas exchange. We have spot and we have futures with physical delivery. But maybe you know Turkish structure, we have government monopoly in our gas market called BOTAŞ. They buy more than 90% of gas from Russia or somewhere else, and they sell it. There are limited private contracts, so we wish to have more contracts in our market to grow our exchange in terms of gas. Now our infrastructure to be hub is ready in terms of exchange. I don't know the idea of hub from governmental side, but it should be, in my opinion, true exchanges like TTF, MBP, or JKM. So infrastructure in Turkey is ready for spot and futures market, and it is a well-functioning market in Turkey. We are clearing around 2 billion cubic meters per year. You see prices hiked before September, and now it's getting less and less. And surprisingly, our price is getting higher than European prices. I think it is related to contracts. Regarding price signals, this part maybe is important. We have a transparency platform. If you are a market participant, you can follow our transparency platform. We have 159 different data sets to understand our price signals. We use also this transparency platform public data to predict prices. Now for daily, weekly, you can predict power and gas prices in Turkey plus minus 3%. But for long term, we have futures market, we have monthly, quarterly, and yearly contracts, but it is not enough as a price signal since liquidity is less than what we want because we just started to operate last year. I think it will grow fast too, like our spot markets. So if you go to our transparency platform, you will see price signals for your last question in terms of economy to invest. Now, Turkish banks or other banks who finance energy investors in Turkey follow up this platform, and also all investors follow up these platforms to predict what will happen in our market. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Turkoglu. Let me ask you, я перейду на русский, все-таки вот...
I'll switch over to Russian, if I may. So one more question. So we have a very focused business breakfast today. So would you please tell us whether the data of your exchange are actually being used to calculate duties and tax by the government? Is the data exchange being used for calculation of taxes?
Actually, our prices include tax, so they collect tax with our prices. When we issue invoice, actually we are a central counterparty, so we are not a simple exchange. We exchange, we are a platform as an exchange, then we clear all quantities, and we issue invoice. So when we issue invoice, we add the tax, VAT, and so everything is registered. And plus, nowadays, I mentioned inframargin and pricing, it is also tax. We don't call it tax, but we collect at the end of the month the extra amount determined by regulation. We collect it, give it to distribution companies, and they decrease the consumer price. It is also a kind of tax. We don't call it tax, but European friends will call it tax. They are planning to apply the similar idea.
Thank you very much. Я хочу попросить взять слово.
And now I'd like to request Alexander Osmalovsky to take the floor, who's the chairman of the board of the Belarusian Universal Commodity Exchange. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at such an important event. Today, I have heard a lot of interesting ideas. And generally, those questions that are being raised today regarding expansion of the list of the items to be traded at St. Petersburg International Mercantile Exchange, as well as taking care of the export items and permits for state procurement operations, as well as creation and development of national indicators. Coming ahead, I'd like to say that I fully agree with those proposals. And I will be happy to share with you the experience of Belarusian Universal Commodity Exchange. I understand very well that the markets of Belarus and Russia are incomparable, but nonetheless, we have accumulated certain experience. Today, at our exchange, we have 5 sections, 5 commodity sections, and more than 5,000 items are being traded. So this list of products that we trade is partially regulated by the government. So there is a specific regulation that obliges companies to sell them or buy them through the exchange trading only. Just to compare, at least approximately, the numbers for the volumes we are talking about here, I could cite some numbers. 2 years ago, a list of mandatory trading items sold at exchange amounted to about 80% of the total turnover of the exchange. Today, it is only around 50%, especially since in the last 2 years, the turnover of our stock exchange increased by almost twofold. So you can easily compare and see the ratio of the mandatory and non-mandatory items for exchange trading. We also trade energy sources in our exchange. Coal was mentioned today. Coal is being procured by our enterprises. Those are foreign exchange transactions. Coal is being imported, and 100% of coal is exchange traded. this level of concentration of goods allows us to resolve a number of objectives with the help of exchange trading. Well, I guess all the exchanges are pursuing a goal to take care of wholesale market. Well, taking into account the number of items and their volume, we are also achieving a goal of defining a fair price for a particular product. And the second goal is to prevent price hikes in the domestic market. How do we do that? Well, if I may, I wanted to share this experience. At every state body, there is a working group. From time to time, it is using market data and sales and purchase operations to identify the lowest threshold price when I will talk about export goods, and when I will talk about import operations, the ceiling, the cap for purchases through exchange operations. So this is the experience we apply to metals. All the metal products are being procured from Russia. And based on our market data and price monitoring in Russia, we identify the cap or the price corridor to the exchange trading. So the transactions are not registered if this cap is exceeded. The same applies to export items. There is a limit, a lower limit, especially if we talk about agricultural products, and you cannot go below this limit. So the enterprises are not allowed to sell below this limit. By doing so, we can affect the prices for export items as well as the domestic market in Belarus. Well, today we've seen the outcomes of the interactive opinion poll regarding creation of national indicators in Russia. Well, I should say I have not participated in this poll. Obviously, I'm not in a position to vote here, but nonetheless, I'd like to express my opinion. I fully support this proposal. More than that, I actually would like to make an additional proposal. Such a national indicator is very much needed, not just by Russia, but also by the Republic of Belarus. As you know, Republic of Belarus cooperates closely with the Russian Federation. That is our key sales market and the market where we purchase many items. So we do need that type of national price indicators. And again, if we talk about the Belarus Universal Commodity Exchange, our export was largely focused on the countries of the European Union. We therefore were guided by European indicators and European information agencies whenever we wanted to sell our goods. Now we refocused our markets. We are working very closely both with the Russian Federation and the Eurasian Economic Union member countries, as well as the countries of Middle Asia, Asia, Southern Asia. Therefore, if I may, I would make even a broader proposal. I think there is a necessity to create an information agency, at least based on the platform of the cooperation between Russia and Belarus. And maybe it could even be further extended to other countries, and the operation of this information agency could operate in the countries of the Eurasian Economic Union. Thank you very much, Mr. Osmolovsky. I very much share your position. And as you know, we have 28 programs going on for a year already. Maybe you could use their potential. And now I'd like to give the floor to Kristina Prokudina, who is Deputy Chairwoman of the Board for Strategic Development, Finance and Corporate Government at Uzbek Commodity Exchange. We know that you have those processes evolving very actively. Please tell us more about it. Good morning, dear colleagues. Yes, indeed, the role and place of the exchange and commodity exchange trade can hardly be overestimated. Primarily, commodity exchange provides for a transparent trading mechanism free from corruption and any kind of fraudulent practices. Having understanding of that, I would say that our government very much support development of exchange trade that is confirmed by a mandatory list of items that are to be traded at the commodity exchange. This list includes 45 items, including fuel and energy products. That includes petrol, diesel, gas condensate, natural gas, and a number of other items, starting from commodities up to raw materials and final products. So we cover the whole processing chain. At our commodity exchange, we also calculate price indicators that are actively used in operations of the state authorities and state management bodies. Lately, we've made some amendments to the tax code of the Uzbekistan Republic, where it is now officially reflected that market data and trading data should serve as a ground for calculation of transfer pricing. Also, now we calculate taxes and duties. So this is one stream where our data is used. Also, commodity exchange indicators are used whenever legal disputes are being settled with engagement of state authorities or with engagement of businesses and enterprises. At the moment, we conduct extensive work to harmonize national legislation in terms of duties and tariffs policy, where we have identified a number of preferences for transactions registered at a commodity exchange. So for a number of items, if those items are traded at the commodity exchange, domestic tariffs are applied for railway transportation. Which contributes to a reduction of the cost of production of those goods. And finally, a low price for end consumer. In fact, exchange operations and commodity markets of Uzbekistan are actively developing. And now coming to your question on the businesses and enterprises, what they think about participating in exchange trading. Well, I can rightfully tell you that their attitude is very positive, because despite the fact that there is state regulation and there are certain mandatory regulatory requirements they have to comply with, nonetheless, many entrepreneurs, including non-residents, participate in the exchange trading voluntarily. Namely, a Lukoil company, whenever they sell their products and commodities according to the production sharing agreements, are selling those products through exchange trade. So that is a certain indicator to us. That is an indicator of transparency and trust towards trading. So generally, this is what I wanted to share with you today on the exchange trade in the Uzbek commodity exchange. And I have participated in the vote on the second question, and I also very much support the idea to calculate market indicators and use market data for their calculation. So actual transactions, actual contracts signed for physical goods is probably the best foundation for price indicators calculation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Madam Prokudina. I very much agree with your approach that commodity exchange allows to compensate for asymmetries in information. I was, though, somewhat surprised in your conversation that you use railway tariffs as an additional tool to stimulate exchange trade. That reminded me of my experience when I used to work as advisor to the government of Primakov. It was a moment of hard crisis. We used this tool to transport agricultural products, but that was a force majeure situation back then. Well, thank you. Well, dear colleagues, we have covered our agenda for today, and now I'd like to give the floor to Alexei Rybnikov, whom you know very well. He's the president of St. Petersburg International Mercantile Exchange, who is the driver and the organizer of our today's breakfast and certainly the exchange rate in Russia. So, Mr. Rybnikov, if I may, I wanted to ask you, how would you assess our today's discussion? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? The floor is yours. Thank you very much. I'll be concise. First of all, I wanted to express my gratitude to all the speakers who've joined us today, have dedicated their time and shared their ideas with us. Some of the topics that were covered today is something that I'd like to react. We discussed the potential list of items that we trade and exchange. Metals were mentioned. I agree. The very first transactions were conducted at the end of August, but it has to become mainstream. The key problem, I guess, is properly identified. What do you trade with? What is the list of metal products and items? There are dozens of hundreds and even thousands of items. So we try to select the most basic items that are used in construction. But I guess that is not a final list because the dialogue with the industry is going on. That includes some industry associations, and we are talking about this particular matter. What do we trade with? What are the items of the trade that we need to focus on to generate liquidity? And this is the work that we are determined to continue. Now, two important topics were covered by Mr. Yanovsky. Those are the matters related to classifiers. That is a very important matter. It's not exactly about revenue or money, but without a properly developed classifier system in the country, it would be very difficult to develop our issues. We are talking about one and the same items frequently, but even in the official checks and bills and invoices of the tax authority, they can be called differently. And whether we like it or not, but we will have to focus on regulation and classifiers and registers for product items. And they have to be unified because it's not normal when businesses and enterprises use their own lists of items and the government, including its procurement system, is using different item list. So we need to make sure we harmonize this process. But it's difficult work to do, but we absolutely have to focus on that. We can't make progress without that. And the second topic is the use of exchange trade as one of the means of state procurement. This is something that we very much support and agree on. We have complete consensus on that with the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, and I guess we should work on that and focus on that. We've been working on that for a few years, but that is work in progress, and I hope that the corresponding legislative decisions will be made.
And now, a couple of words about the indicators. Alexey Ivanovich Kulapin mentioned the theme related to indicators for green thematics. This is a complicated story, frankly speaking, and it is complicated because there is, from one hand, there is voluntary market for carbon units. It is not standardized. Can it be traded in the market, in the exchange, or it can stay as OTC so far? I think this is a subject for talks and discussions in the coming months. I know that colleagues have arranged a deal already, a small one, but whether voluntary certificates market will become an exchange market, this is an open question. As for the second part related to carbon units, this market does not exist yet, but at least within the framework of Sakhalin experiment, it should emerge by 2025. This market is the market for units for quotas execution. And in this market, these units are all interchangeable. You can trade them, and we think that this market should be an exchange market because it is started from the scratch, and we can set quite strict frames to it, and liquidity at the initial stage at least will be inevitably limited, and the more efficient we are in this, the more representative is the prices. And in Russia, we have successful experience of setting up a price, the market of short-term state liabilities that started as an exchange market. Yes, in 1998, it was not successful enough, but this is not because of the infrastructure of the market. So I think exchangization of market of carbon units, I think the prospects for it are quite promising. And another point we already mentioned many times, implementation of indicators into the practice of operations of state offices in calculating taxes, duties, mineral extraction tax, and other damper duties and other tax payments. This is the first question we articulated, and I was quite surprised by the results of the poll. The majority said we should do it and we should do it immediately, but I thought that the answer number two will be we do not really need it because the market is global, the price is global. Why creating something with national indicators? There is an international market, let's take international pricing. But number two was the answer, surprisingly enough. 11% of respondents said, let's wait and see, let's not do anything now, let the foreigners leave the market and then we start work. We do not share this position, but this is the reality of our life. This position exists, and some state agencies also stick to it, but we do not like it. We say that we should move forward and be prepared for the future, but that's what we have for today. The only thing I wanted to say about it is that the exchange is ready in all aspects to substitute indicators at any point of time when we need it. And many times we addressed various offices and we compared how we calculate indicators we have against those used in the state agencies based on international foreign price information. Well, we have full correlation. The quality of our indicators are higher because they're based on really concluded deals. So let's just try and make this step forward. It is very important. We need it. When Brent crude oil contract was launched in the 80s, it was not successful at the beginning, but from the third or the fourth try, only after the tax authority of Great Britain told oil companies that now we will be calculating taxes with this indicator. And afterwards, everyone started trading with this and liquidity went there. And this is the most trading contract in the energy sector today. So everyone has such experience. So I'm quite positive, despite all the challenges I mentioned. I'm positive about the prospects for this point. I see that consensus is building up in the market and the state bodies, and we are actively talking to tax authorities and the customs service. And I think that at the end, this consensus will lead to the first stage. When everything is completed, it will go into practice of state offices, and when everyone realizes that they need it and it really works effectively, the work for building up a national system of mercantile indicators, commodities indicators, we are doing now, and we're quite successful in this, I think. But we could have be successful without the daily support of the governmental offices and Federal Anti-Monopoly Service and the government, because a lot of things are dependent on the regulations. But we're optimistic. I think we can complete this work successfully. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexey Ernestovich. Colleagues, we are very dynamic in covering our agenda, and we have a couple of minutes if you want to comment on what we were talking about or ask questions to present speakers. It's high time to make it. Well, since everything is clear for everyone, then thank you very much for your participation. And the theme we're discussing today is very promising, and I am an advocate of setting up national price indicators. Thank you very much, and see you next time at the exchange also.